It is our pleasure to be joined by, I mean, he's the most handsome man, the handsomest, the most handsome, whatever the word is. He's our guy, Mike Golic Jr. You can catch him on ESPN Radio, on Shanae and Golic Jr., the radio show for what? For the teens, for the kids?
Yeah, what do they always say? Wu-Tang is for the children. Like Chiney and Golic Jr. is for the children. I think that's our motto at this point.
Absolutely.
They play it on Teen Bop or what's that? Kid Bop.
Kids Bop.
We do need to get like on a Kids Bop track. That would be the full brand merger for us as the young, because we already feel it. Like you look around the lineup and you see all these guys in our national lineup that have been doing this forever. And Chiney and I will just look at each other every once in a while. Like we just did a whole segment talking about like twerking, or I almost fell out of my chair trying to do it live. Like somehow they keep letting us, have our badges work coming in the building every day. So I don't ask
the
questions.
Limits until they turn you down, right?
Exactly. I just keep showing up every day until my badge doesn't work.
There we go. Okay, Golic, so much going on in the sports world right now, and you're one of the guys that is so dialed in to so many different things. But I did want to talk a little FCS college football with you because it's been really cool, man, seeing the FCS teams get some more TV time here in the spring. You were on the call for South Dakota State's beatdown of Delaware in the FCS final or FCS semifinals. How has it been covering some of that FCS stuff and the national championship set, man? What are you kind of seeing? Because that looks like it's going to be a great game.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. You mentioned the exposure. So Matt Berry and I, who were on the call for the FCS quarterfinal and semifinal games that I did, we were together on Thursday nights in the fall. And it was a very similar setup where, because the rollout for conferences like the Pac-12 and Big Ten came later on, the inventory for Thursday night games tended to be a ton of MAC games, a ton of American Conference games, the Sun Belt. And we said in the fall, like, what great exposure to have a night of week that belongs to these conferences, the group of 5 conferences, in a way that allowed fans to maybe get more access to them than ever. So you're right. It's been the same during the spring, and it's been incredible to see where these staffs have found some advantages. Like you talk to coaches who had a chance to watch other football for almost the first time in most of their careers during the fall, because they're usually knee deep in game plans. You had a whole class of freshmen that essentially became early enrollees. The game we just did for Delaware and South Dakota State, we talked to the Jackrabbits about Mark Gronowski, their true freshman quarterback, who's excelled this year, was a runner-up for the top freshman of the year in FCS. And they said this guy had so many practices under his belt by the time we got to this point, because he was around all fall, because he was here for spring camp. And so it's been really interesting to watch them maneuver these things. I think a lot of people have a newfound appreciation. It was nice to get these games on E1, on ABC for the semifinals. And I got to like South Dakota State's chances. Now, I didn't get a chance to call any of Sam Houston State's, and I was the idiot watching that game. I covered James Madison a week earlier. I tweeted out and I said, well, it looks like we're going to have James Madison and South Dakota State in the finals, these teams just to cut above the rest. I went and listen, I was tired after the game, so I took a little nap because at the half, their score looked like ours. All of a sudden, I wake up in the third quarter and Sam Houston's up 11, and I don't know which way is up or down. So I saw Shid, their quarterback, who did an outstanding job in that game, especially in the second half, arms and legs. I think that's kind of the matchup with both of these quarterbacks, but I love the Jackrabbits up front on both sides of the ball. I knew their offensive line, Gabe, but you'll appreciate the 605 Hogs. Since there's only one area code in South Dakota, I found out, a state of 800,000 people with one area code. So we've got the 605 Hogs, but defensively up front for South Dakota State on their D-line, that was a dominant performance. 3- and 4-man rushes getting home. So I like their chances heading into this matchup just because of the way they looked up front.
So is there, because of all the crap that happened a year ago, this thing just, took place, and here we are in the spring playing football. Have they looked at this and said, gosh, maybe stepping away from the fall and living in the shadows of everyone else, maybe this is something we should at least evaluate and see if it will work out for us?
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. I didn't hear any commentary from any of these staffs on it, so this is just me thinking out loud. The one thing that may deter it is for some of these, marquee programs. I mean, South Dakota State, North Dakota State, James Madison. These teams are putting guys into the NFL on occasion. We saw Central Arkansas had Robert Rochelle taken in the draft. So if you're one of these teams, would you want to risk your potentially draft eligible players opting out? Kay Johnson was a great wide receiver for South Dakota State who opted out of this season, ended up signing as an undrafted free agent with the Seahawks, but they were down his services because this happened, because you went without this fall. Now, we can say it's worked out for them, but I'm wondering how much they want to make a habit of this, if it would mean some of their best players, maybe now at the transfer portal, the one-time transfer rule, opting to jump up a level, play in the fall, and better their chances for the pros. So there's a lot of things I think that are kind of just under the surface that might prevent this from being a full move.
Okay, you are obviously a football guy. Do you like having this thing in the spring? Like, do you enjoy? Because at points in time, like I turn it on and I'm like, this is awesome. Especially I watch it when you're on the call because you're tweeting about it. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'm gonna watch my buddy call the game. I'm watching. It's a good level of football, but sometimes I feel like I like that break from football in the spring to kind of recharge. So like, how do you feel about it? Have you enjoyed the FCS being played in the spring this year?
I've enjoyed it and I appreciate the work they put in. I think I'm like you, where there's something special about football having such an ownership stake over the fall. Like, you step into the fall and we know our Saturdays and Sundays belong to college football and the NFL. And there's something that's great about knowing it's going to be in that spot, because you guys know this. I mean, when we're covering the NFL, that's a year-round business. College football's become year-round business with spring football, with the way people cover recruiting. So there is part of me that enjoys getting to kind of get our heads back above water in all this. And we've had plenty of practice. Like, we came off 2 straight years of the XFL, the Alliance of American Football. Like, we've had a lot of doses of spring football. And I think I'm with you. I kind of like when you're in high school. I like going and playing lacrosse for a while, having basketball season, being able to work through these things. But there is a part of you that'll always, no matter what, like moth to a flame, if football's on, we're going to find our way there.
Okay, so it's a legit playoff, right? And they make their way and they have a legit champion. And there's really no one that can, well, maybe people can, but there's not a whole lot left up to, debate as to who should have been in, who shouldn't have. Having covered it now at a deep level, do you look at this and say, this is what Division I should be doing? Or do you look at it and say, there's no way we should do this in Division I?
I say we're going to get the same problems. That's the one thing that was most interesting to me, because when I was getting ready to call these games, I was like, all right, you know what? I'm going to go and I'm going to listen to some of the podcasts. I'm going to listen to some of the people that cover the FCS full time and see what they have to say. And you heard the same arguments about how the hell did the Missouri Valley put 5 teams in here? What the hell were they doing with the seeding, putting so-and-so? James Madison was first in all the FCS polls during the season, but winds up a 3 seed. And so we saw a lot of the same arguments pop up. And for the expansion crowd, which I know it's coming because it's going to involve more people. And I think that's what the FCS does, is it involves and it holds the interest of so many different teams by expanding the same arguments we have doing 4 teams just for them to 16. So I think the difference with FBS will obviously be, what are they going to do to the regular season? We've got so much money tied up in TV contracts for these respective leagues. Are they going to be willing to potentially sacrifice a regular season game or 2 to knock this thing all the way out? And then, of course, divvying up the bowl money. But it reinforced why expansion feels inevitable, because it just expands all the arguments we're having now to more teams, which is more fun.
I feel like in the expansion conversation, you have to pick a number, right? Because we all, like you said, it's inevitable. Are you a 8-team guy, 12-team guy, 16 guy?
Which I was shocked when they actually said they were discussing 12.
I don't know what 63 combinations they went through, but it seems like those are the choices. Like 8, 12, 16, 10 doesn't make any sense to me. So, like, is there a certain number you think that the CFP will end up with?
Give
us all your insider ESPN information, okay?
Well, what you mentioned is the truth. So like every year we have like this, seminar for college football before the season. And when we hear from Bill Hancock and these people, and it's nothing like, it's not off the record or anything like that, but we get to talk to them kind of before the rest of the public is hearing from them. And when we heard them whispering about college football expansion, like saying it out loud, like you just mentioned, it's like, oh, okay. The minute they start to say things out loud, they've already worked through all of the Doctor Strange 14 million possible outcomes for this. I think 8 would end up being the magic number. I think we know in college football that beyond that like 8-9 number, you're going to see a pretty big drop off in who it's actually possible to win a national title for. We've seen so many blowouts in the first round. I mean, hell, I've gotten to witness a couple of those firsthand for the Fighting Irish.
Same.
We know it's a difficult uphill battle for the rest of college football to match up with what has been Bama and Clemson and, the occasional Ohio State appearance in the early course of the college football playoffs. So I think 8's a sweet spot where I can still trust these are blue chip talented teams that are going to go out there and field close to comparable levels of talent that might be able to switch it up on a given day. You'll get a group of 5 team in there. You'll get, what would have been this year's Cincinnati or in years past UCF. And I think it feeds enough mouths in the college football ecosystem.
Oh my gosh. I consider it to be the dumbest thing in all of sports that there's, like you mentioned, there's a drop off between 8 and 9. How about 8 and 105? There's like 130 Division I schools, and they're all playing for the same thing. But a massive majority of those teams are never in the fight at all. They're just there. Why do we have the non-Power 5 schools? Why are they not competing for their own championship? Would they even want to? I think it's so dumb that a school can go undefeated and not even have a chance to play for a national championship in that sport.
So I think even if we made a separate national championship, there'd be an understanding it was a lesser, right? Like there'd be an understanding that it's not the one that we're going to celebrate. And I really, again, going back through this fall and getting to cover a lot of games in the group of 5, you're reminded that the best parts of college football are like the sweet, finer notes that come from when this was a really regional sport. Like right now, college football has become a national game. The college football playoffs consolidated all of it there. Like the best parts of college football are regional and conference rivalries. It's for a lot of people, and I know this sounds funny coming out of the mouth of an independent, but like it's going and finding a way to win your conference. It's all of these things for programs that I got to see firsthand in the fall that were still incredible motivators, including getting to certain bowl games. We know right now the top ranked group of 5 team gets to have their crack at a New Year's Six bowl. Like those are all things that we see still matter a lot. And so, we can tie it up with a nice bow and put it in a different package, but I don't know if it's going to accomplish anything different. I think it's just kind of a good reminder for all of us that you get to decide with your own perspective what you enjoy about college football. And we can make it all about the national championship. But I think when we do that, especially for, like you said, the teams that in their heart of hearts know they're not going to compete for a national championship with Alabama, I think we're missing out on a lot of the best parts of the game.
While expansion is coming, name, image, and likeness is here, right? And you look at Mississippi, the state of Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, even though Georgia's laws got that weird 75% thing in it, which I still don't understand that, but they all have NIL laws going into effect July 1st. Now, Mark Emmert has come out this weekend and said that he's pushing the NCAA's board to get something done on name, image, and likeness. Before then, as a man that has covered college football for quite some time now, how much faith do you have in the old NCAA that something will get done?
The 11th hour, if I've ever seen it.
Yeah, this is an audio medium, so I'll verbally font what I'm holding up to you guys right now. There's a 0% chance that I trust Mark Emmert to do anything other than wave whatever their version of the white flag is here. And I've seen Nicole Arbach and some of the folks at The Athletic put out pretty detailed look at what the plans can look like. We know a lot of the college basketball players that were demanding a meeting with Mark Emmert before the tournament were saying they want a waiver that just basically washes the NCAA's hands of it, so that if you're a player trying to do this in a state that doesn't yet have legislation in place, you're not going to get dinged for it. And I'm sure the number one driver for that is going to be coaches. Like, the last thing you want to do is be the coach that's got to recruit against this now, because quite frankly, we saw the headline pop up last week. Duquesne hired a brand coach for their team. And they did that with the acknowledgement that part of it's like, we got to kind of grab the headline in a different way, because we've read North Carolina, the other big schools of the world, they've already been working with these companies that have popped up to help kids try and profit off this and try and navigate this new landscape as best they can. So everyone, I think, is really on the school level been preparing for this for some extent already. And so now it's going to be these coaches, these ADs, I mean, some of them, most of them, the highest paid employees in their state, really starting to pound the pavement and say, all right, we got to accelerate this process here, because I don't want to have to walk into a living room and explain to a 5-star linebacker why he's going to come here and play for the scholarship and all the normal stuff, but he's going to be able to go and rake in tens of thousands of dollars posting stuff on his Twitter account come fall if he signs with X program that's already got it figured out. So I think Mark Emmert's going to have to just wave the white flag on this, because they've continued to kick the ball down the road. I think trying to call other people's bluff to see if they'd maybe forget about this, or just opt and hope that Congress would bail everyone out sooner than they have. But at the end of the day, they got dragged kicking and screaming into this, and that's how it's going to end for them.
Well, yeah, and you're right, and it's happening. And what's it going to look like? We don't know, but I'd love to hear what you think some of the good things that are going to come out of this are, and what some of the bad things, because we all know no matter what it is, there's always going to be some unintended consequences that people are going to try and leverage.
Yeah, I mean, listen, on the bad side of things, you're still going to get like the recruiting funny money that winds up in college football and is in college football in a number of places already. It's going to have a new avenue. And so I'm sure there's going to be even more creative accounting that goes on with bagmen, with the kind of things that we've seen. But my thought process has always been, like you said, there's always going to be bad that comes with these things. So it doesn't mean we stop pursuing the good, because the good that comes from this is campus wide. Like, and I know we've beaten this to the ground over and over again, but everyone's going to be able to make something off this. Like, you guys know, like, you couldn't even, promote a camp you were back in your hometown using your name or using your status as a student athlete. You couldn't go around on campus. I mean, hell, our women's basketball team is like the most popular team in the South Bend community at Notre Dame. Like, locally, there would be opportunities going out of style. And then we know social media, it's a place where so many of these kids live already and are so savvy. I mean, hell, we just saw an entire sport in women's college basketball essentially grab the reins of the conversation through TikTok, through posting videos of their circumstances. And so I think it's just going to allow a lot of players to make easy money. I mean, you guys know this, and probably like I did, played with plenty of guys that were, sending home whatever stipend money or extra scholarship money they had to help their folks keep the lights on, to help pay for certain bills. Like, plenty of guys have to grow up way sooner than they should, but that's the reality of the situation. Is people come to college, people play football for all different reasons. And so now for guys that might be really great college players and never have a name beyond that, they're going to get to capitalize on that period, because the rest of this has become too big business to ignore. It's not that, a scholarship and that going towards your education and leaving without a mound of debt is an incredible opportunity, but it's an acknowledgement that has been the baseline, and the rest of this has continued to grow. And we haven't really matched that with inflation, even with the stipends, even with all these other things that have popped up along the way. And so this might do something in the matter of sort of course correcting that for the time being, at least.
So one of the interesting things for me about name, image, and likeness is, and a lot of people have talked about college football playoff expansion, maybe bringing more parity to college football, because, some people are tired of just watching Bama and Clemson. I'm not one of those people. I like watching the best players. I'm cool with it. But do you think this name, image, and likeness stuff, where a guy can go to another school, maybe a smaller school, and be the guy and kind of cash in on being the guy, as opposed to going to Bama or Ohio State, sitting for a couple of years, waiting his turn? Do you think some guys will decide to go other places and maybe we could get a few more good teams or maybe some more competitive games or something in the sport?
Yeah, I think this and the one-time transfer rule coming to life together are going to be a really big boom for that. Because I mean, just look at college football in the last 5 years. Look at how many Kyler Murrays, Joe Burrows, Justin Fields. Like, most of the best college football quarterbacks have been transfer quarterbacks that were sitting in loaded QB rooms. That, you're right, if we had done this the normal way, if we had done this the way that they were doing with quarterbacks at USC when we were growing up, and we watched them, all right, go start for a year, go to the NFL, next guy that had been waiting there, like, we spread that talent around, especially at the quarterback position, and we let guys go that year and have a chance to impact the game. I think you have a lot better chance of that. The end all be all would be reducing scholarship limits. That would be probably the thing that would even out the talent level the most and keep schools like Alabama and Georgia and Ohio State from clogging all the depth on their rosters. But I think name, image, and likeness being able, I mean, we've seen some of that cool factor and that want to be the guy at other places already pop up in certain spots. I mean, look at what Deion Sanders has done at the HBCU level. Look at some of the, big time recruits that he's been able to coax over there or get to transfer there. So you're already seeing some of that pull to other areas that I think is going to be made stronger by both those things.
I'm fascinated by college football. Is such a weird animal, such a weird beast. The recruiting, it just how you have to manage all your players. It's so different than the NFL. But now I've watched Urban Meyer make the jump, and we've always seen and theorized what would happen if certain coaches went to the NFL. And at one time it looked like Urban Meyer's never going to coach again, and then a day later it's like, this may happen. And I got to tell you, they haven't played a game or haven't even been close to that, but I'm liking some of the moves and some of the things that he's done down there at Jacksonville. You think it works?
I think it's got a good shot for a couple of reasons. For me, the biggest one is the youth on that roster. Like, I think for Urban Meyer, as he makes this transition, he's never struck me as like a PJ Fleck, who's going to go in with a lot of the rah-rah stuff, pull cotton out of his pocket at the pep rally, all that. Like, that was never Urban Meyer. Urban was always the CEO. And as he moved stops, he always kind of learned and adjusted the way that he went about things. And I think that mentality always plays well at the NFL level, but there's still going to be some things he's got to grow through. And I think being able to do it with a roster that's largely made up of guys early on in their careers, a lot of their key players are first contract guys that quite frankly grew up with Urban Meyer, known as one of the best coaches in college football history. And so you can walk in with a little cachet as opposed to having to deal with a bunch of 9 and 10 year vets who, if you start spouting off, are going to look at you like, all right, rookie coach, like, get out of my face with that. I'm the one that's actually been around here. So I think he's got a good shot. I mean, he just got handed the best player in college football from last year, who seems like someone who's a true culture shifter of a player, someone who can get you out of a lot of problems. So I think they've got a pretty good shot. But as Urban's seeing already, it's a little different when you don't get to make all of the decisions. And when the decisions that you make, going back to the Chris Doyle hire from not too long ago, are scrutinized in a way that maybe aren't when you're protected by that, bubble around certain campuses and some of these big time programs.
Okay. NFL wise, what the hell's going on with the Aaron Rodgers thing? I mean, what, why, like, how do you think this ends up playing out, man? Because it got really, really weird. The timing on draft night was bizarre. He was giving stuff, or his agent, whoever was giving stuff to, it seemed like everybody that was covering the draft. I mean, it was calculated and weird. How do they fix it, or does it get fixed?
I don't think it does. Like, and we've kind of played this game of chicken all offseason with quarterbacks, right? Like we thought Russell Wilson in Seattle, there was no way that was going to work. And somehow it did. You know, the Deshaun Watson situation was trending this way. And then we know that's been derailed by very serious legal allegations that make this not a football conversation with him anymore. But we kind of saw it had this same tenor to it where there seems to be genuine disdain. And for Aaron Rodgers, it's Brian Gutekunst, their GM, who seems to be the source of his ire. And now it's gotten very public and on multiple occasions, because that was the other thing about draft night. That wasn't the first time we had heard this. Like, this was largely rehashed information, but it was on at a time of year where all the attention was going to be on it, where we wondered, could Green Bay make something happen before the draft? And if you've got a quarterback who, listen, like we all saw him at the Kentucky Derby dressed up like Bizarro Willy Wonka and like saying to Mike Tirico, you know, it's really unfortunate that this stuff got out about our relationship, but didn't do a damn thing to refute it. So I think it's just going to be a matter of how far does he want to push the pedal down? Like, how uncomfortable, like, are we due for an Aaron Rodgers appearance on McAfee where he really just lights the powder keg on this thing once and for all, says the thing very publicly, like sort of the James Harden-esque no going back, where he's on the court throwing in the towel, he's in the post-game press conference, it is what it is. Like, Aaron Rodgers isn't going to have the luxury of getting to the season and doing that, because if it gets to that point, he's going to have to sit. But I just think he seems to be genuinely ticked off at these guys in a way that, with what we also have heard about Aaron Rodgers anecdotally, he seems to be a guy who remembers a lot of what gets said. He seems to be a very prideful guy, and one that we know it seems difficult, like, but a lot of the great ones are. And for a talent like that, you usually make it work. And in this case, they felt like they knew better and it backfired on them.
How do you play this if you're Green Bay? If you're on that side of things, okay, you've got a franchise quarterback that's been unbelievable for you. Won a Super Bowl, just played at maybe his best level ever, but at the same time, the end is near. It's well, I guess you would think that it is. How do you play this? Do you try and say, we drafted a guy that we believe in a year ago that we think maybe has a future? It could be a year or two in learning, but we like this kid. I guess it depends on what they think of him first and foremost. But do you try and use this as a chance to get value? Or is this like the ultimate game of poker where you kind of have to call him on his bluff and you plan on him being your quarterback next year, and that's what you stick to?
So this is where it gets really interesting, because you're right. It's all about what they think of Jordan Love. If they think Jordan Love could go out there, and especially because we talked about last year, like the conversation about Green Bay's roster has sort of been kind of like the conversation about Mac Jones in the NFL draft, where he was overrated for a while. Then he felt like he was underrated. And ultimately, he's drafted exactly where he probably should have been at 15 to the Patriots. The Packers roster is one where we have raked it over the coals and said, man, they need to, how are they not getting Aaron Rodgers to anything, all that stuff, when they might have one of the better offensive lines in the league, and certainly maybe the best left tackle in the league. They've got a bona fide stud number one wide receiver. Like, they've got one of the best, most efficient running backs in football. There's more there than nothing, but it's the principle of what they've done. And so if you trust Matt LaFleur's progress as a play caller, if you trust the rest of that offense around Jordan Love, and you ultimately believe, all right, your quarterback had time last year, developed behind closed doors in the building, and you're confident, then you play the game of chicken. Then you stare at Aaron Rodgers and say, we're going to go out here and assume you're the quarterback. And if not, you can sit and risk watching the backup go out there and ball. Because that's the worst case scenario for Aaron, is he sits real meaningful time and Jordan Love looks incredible and the offense barely misses a beat. And we start thinking, well, was it more of the system than it was Aaron Rodgers? Was Aaron Rodgers a little more 2019 than we gave him credit for? That's the nightmare scenario if you're confident in Green Bay. If not, you got to keep trying to go out there and see if you can just throw enough money at him to make this go away. Like, we've heard plenty of reports that they've offered to make him the highest paid quarterback in football, and he's so pissed off that he turned it down. Like, maybe at some point that number just gets too good, and the assurance that, all right, Green Bay basically swallows their pride, says we were wrong, and gives him money through and has to see if they can sell off Jordan Love. That would be if you're not confident in the guy that you traded back into the first round and drafted.
Looking at the other big stories in the sports world right now, I I will spare you the pain of talking about the 21-47 Oklahoma City Thunder. But you look at the NBA right now. It's getting to be that time. A lot of talk about the play-in games. Now you're hearing players say it. Obviously, when LeBron says something about it, that makes a lot of waves. So what do you think of the play-in format? Because I'm not gonna lie, dude, I kind of dig it. I'm more invested in watching some of these games than I feel like I've ever been.
Oh, I completely agree. When we tried this in the bubble last year, that was one of my huge takeaways. Is this play-on tournament was a huge win for them. And we know for the NBA, part of that win is trying to curb tanking, get more teams trying to have access to the playoffs. So you got few going south trying to play for a number one pick. But for all the complaints, like we've heard, and I saw some people saying, like, what if this play-in tournament costs you the Lakers, who have been struggling in the Western Conference, the Celtics, who have struggled at times in the Eastern Conference this year, two of the marquee brands in the NBA? What if you lose out on those guys? I said, all right, well, you know what? There's an argument to be made that like they need to be better. Like having bad versions of those teams in the postseason, while it's nice to sell tickets, is going to be short-lived if they suck. The other thing is, well, let's say it goes the other way. Like I think this could have just as much of a chance to save some teams. If you have some of those key brands that are on the bubble and all this, like look at Golden State. Golden State's a team that where they've sat for a lot of the season would have been left out of the playoffs. And now if they sneak in, I think they're an 8 seed right now, but let's say they drop down to a 9 seed, but Steph Curry's on this individual tear and you get him and they win and come out of that. Now you've got one of the marquee brands in basketball that because of the play-in tournament had a chance at this postseason that wouldn't have otherwise existed. So I think for the guys that are going to be forced to play in it, yeah, it sucks for them. They know it's not about them. This is about the bigger picture, but I think it's going to do just as much good in getting some of those names and teams potentially involved at times where they struggle.
One of the things I love about it is, and we talked about this before, Gabe, is whether you are a fan of one of those teams that's in the play-in or not, America loves win or go home, right? No matter what the sport is, when it's win or go home, like I'll tune in to watch if I know those guys are going to be dying over every shot because they got a playoff check, coming up, if they get the win, people will tune into that. And that gives you a big exposure to maybe players and leagues and different people that just typically wouldn't tune in. You get some different eyeballs.
Oh, absolutely. I'm and now they didn't end up making it in the play-in tournament, but I'm going to use the bubble concept in the same way last year. Like, look at what that added exposure, the 8 games they decided did for the Phoenix Suns. Mm-hmm. Like Devin Booker was a star name coming out of there. They were the talk of the town for going undefeated in the bubble and just missing out on the playoffs. And it was the springboard into a Phoenix Suns team that's now been second or third in the Western Conference for most of the season. So I'm with you. I think especially in a league that we know, like LeBron and these guys are getting older. A lot of these guys have been beat up, the marquee stars. They're getting closer and closer to the finish line. As we look at Donovan Mitchell and Jamal Murray and this next wave of stars, these are great areas and great proving grounds for, like last year, them to build postseason folklore, because that's the thing that we build stars on in the NBA is what have you done in big time moments in the playoffs that we can believe in the next time you get there.
Okay. I do not want you to incriminate yourself. So plead the fifth if you must. Do you watch baseball? Because I don't.
So very, very little, but and this is kind of like the backdoor trick that we've done, because like we don't end up talking a ton of baseball unless it's some big picture story. But we decided as a show, you know what, this year we're going to try as best we can to stick with and follow the Padres. We made a big dog and pony show of it. We said, all right, young team, Fernando Tatis, a name everybody's going to know. They play in the same division as the Dodgers, and we saw how those series were. And so we're kind of using that as a gateway into hopefully being able to just kind of have that tool in our bag from now on.
Well, there you go. Because I was thinking about it, and I was like, man, should I ask Golic about baseball? He's probably got to talk about baseball on his national radio show. And then I was like, he doesn't like baseball. He's always tweeting about lacrosse.
I can say, man, my spring's bought up by stick sports, like the other stick sport, I should say. By the way, for anyone watching, it would have happened a half hour ago. Selection Sunday on ESPNU for men's and women's college lacrosse. Notre Dame was looking like a 4 seed right now, and the Final Four is in Connecticut this year. So I'm a kid in a candy store, man.
There you go.
Awesome.
Well, Mike, you're the best. You're the best doing it, man. I'm so happy all the success you've got going on. I love you. You're the best. Thank you for joining us.
Love you too, buddy. Thank you guys for having me. Always a ton of fun. And I'm going to go see if that's actually Ivy or not.
Yeah, where are you?
Don't touch it.
I'm out in Scottsdale, man. It's a beautiful Western time zone sunset right now, so I'm soaking it in.
Well,
Nice.
get you a nice glass of red wine and go soak in that sunset, buddy.
I just went to the grocery store and got some. You know me well, sir.
Attaboy. All right, man. See ya.
See you guys.